Everyone. Thank you very much, Don, for the introduction. Just going to change my glasses. Yes, good morning, fellow Earthlings, my fellow travelers on spaceship Earth. As we circumnavigate the sun, our star, I just wish at this time of year we get just a little bit closer, warm us up a bit more. But this is the only planet known in the whole universe that is capable of sustaining life. And this is Earth Month, as you know. Last Wednesday was Earth Day, and our theme this month at the Fellowship is Nurturing Nature. As Don mentioned, we have had a couple of presentations already. We actually started off the first Sunday in April with Fiona Heath and her presentation, Earth Blessings. And then Larry's inspiring presentation last Sunday, addressing Earth grief through active hope. And now my presentation today. I mentioned last Sunday that I got the inspiration for this title from a book written by Dr. Helen Caldecott, If You Love This Planet. And I mentioned that it was published in the 1970s. I was out by about 20 years. It was published in the 1990s. If You Love This Planet, Helen Caldecott was an Australian, she still is, she's probably 88, 89 years old, still a passionate activist. But back in the 1950s, when I was just a little boy, tiny boy, back in the 1950s, Helen Caldecott was speaking out about nuclear arms testing. The United States, Russia, and France were all carrying out nuclear tests in the atmosphere, exposing millions of people to radiation. And so she enlisted thousands of physicians around the world to form an organization to speak out against nuclear testing, not only nuclear testing, but the possibility of nuclear war and the importance of getting rid of these nuclear weapons, which we still have, unfortunately. But that was what Helen Caldecott started out doing. And I never read her book until I saw it at the Rotary book sale last year at the Groots. And it was there, so I picked it up. And I thought it was about nuclear testing, about nuclear war. But it's actually more about the environment, because as time went on, Helen realized that nuclear war was not the only big threat to the planet. It was also ecological destruction. And she began speaking out about that. And of course, focusing now in recent times on climate change. She now says nuclear war and climate change are the two biggest threats to the planet. And Helen recognized that love is the only force that will stop us from destroying the planet. And Larry articulated that really well last Sunday. On page 193 in Helen's book, she says, "Only if we understand the beauty of nature will we love it." She goes on to write that only when we love nature will we be inspired to take action. She uses four words beginning with the letter L. First word is love. Learn to love the planet. Second word is learn. Learn all about it. Learn about the issues. Educate yourself. Number three, the third L stands for live. Live your life accordingly. Walk lightly upon the earth. And the fourth L stands for legislate. Work to bring legislation to make change happen. So let me continue with a personal experience. I belong to the Kiwanis Club that Dick belongs to, and Paddy. And Paul has just announced today that he's going to join us, our newest member. So one of the things that I do with Kiwanis is I volunteer at London Road School and help the students with reading. And the week before March break, I was sitting with one of my students, and I'll call him Zach, that's not his real name, but I like Zach, it's a cool name. So I said, Zach, do you have any plans for March break? What are you going to be doing? And he said, I'm going to be playing video games. It was not the answer I was hoping to hear. So I said, Zach, well, that's fine, you know, video games are fun, but aren't you looking forward to getting outside, you know, and playing outdoors with your friends? And he said, I'm not allowed to go outside. I said, why not? He said, my mom won't let me go outside because we live in an apartment. So he lives in an apartment. His mom can't see him from the apartment. She's afraid to let him go outside by himself. Like, how tragic is that? So too many children grow up today with what could be called nature deficit syndrome. And it's a pandemic, because most children in the world today are growing up in towns and cities. And they grow up to become adults with nature deficit syndrome. And doctors are now writing prescriptions to people who come to them with anxiety and depression. They're giving them prescriptions saying, get into nature. You know, make a commitment to spend an hour or two, at least a week, in nature. There's only one sure way to love the natural world, and that's to immerse ourselves in nature as much as possible. Regular time spent in nature gives a crucial boost to our physical health. Larry talked about the chemicals that come off cedar trees that we breathe in and boost our immune systems. So nature boosts our physical health and our mental health, as well as our emotional well-being. And for many people, it's also a fourth thing. It's a spiritual experience. The famous American poet Mary Oliver says, for me, the door to the woods is the door to the temple. So we adults have a responsibility to give children these experiences, to develop that kind of love, to give them hope for the future. Because hope matters. Another book I've read is Hope Matters. And it's telling us what Larry told us last week. We have to develop hope if we are going to act. And that's exactly what it says in the book. It says, hope calls for action. Action is impossible without hope. Hope matters. And it was hope that motivated me to help form Sarnia Environmental Activists in the 1990s, which Lisa and I were members of, if you remember that, Lisa. And we held protests. We protested against the shipment of toxic mine waste that was planning to come to Sarnia from Nova Scotia. We also went to City Hall to ask for a bylaw to oppose chemical pesticides on lawns. That didn't pass, but then the provincial government did bring in a provincial ban. It was hope that motivated me to run as a candidate for the Green Party of Canada in 3 federal elections, 2000, 2004, and 2008. And it is hope that motivates me today to be a volunteer with Climate Action Sarnia Lambton. And we have a few other members of Climate Action Sarnia Lambton here today as well. What I have come to understand at a very deep level is that Dr. Helen Caldecott was right. She was one of the first people to say, we have to love this planet. We have to learn to love this planet, because only love will save us. So this is the hills that surround my birth city of Belfast in Northern Ireland. I wrote a column in the Sarnia Journal in 2024, and it's still on the Sarnia Journal website. If you go in under columnist, you can find the article. And it was about me in Belfast, walking in the Belfast hills, something I love to do on weekends and in the summer. My friends and I would jump on a bus, take the bus up to the terminus, and then hike over the hills. And from the top of the hills, you could have a wonderful panoramic view of the whole city. You could see right out to the Irish Sea. You could see to the north where Slemish Mountain was, where St. Patrick was a slave. And if you look to the south, you could see 25 miles away, you could see the outline of the Mourne Mountains. And the Mourne Mountains was another place that I loved to go to whenever I had a chance to walk and to camp. The Mournes are where C.S. Lewis, who also grew up in Belfast, spent his childhood. He spent his childhood in Belfast, but in the summers his family would go to the Mourne Mountains. And that is where he got the inspiration for the magical kingdom of Narnia. He wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And that's where he got the motivation for the magical kingdom of Narnia, spending time in the Mourne Mountains, in nature. But for me, the Belfast Hills were my magical kingdom as a boy. I loved being in nature, exploring the trails, getting away from the grimy city, spending time up there. And when Dorothy and I returned to Belfast, I always try to set aside at least one day to go back to the hills for a walk, for a hike. When Dorothy and I welcomed our two children, Kira and Kevin, into the world, we fostered a love of the outdoors in them. We took them to the parks, we took them to the beach, to the pinery, we went camping, tobogganing and skating in the wintertime. Any opportunity to get them outdoors. Once we took them to the Rockies for a horseback riding trip, and we camped under the stars. We actually saw the International Space Station pass overhead. What an experience. And now that we're grandparents, yes, that's it, okay. Now that we're grandparents, we have three grandkids in Alberta. They live just outside Lethbridge. On the left is the middle grandson, Sean. And, we get the kids, when we're there, we make sure we get them outdoors. We take them to the parks, whatever, to the Rockies, whatever. Get them away from their devices, get them outdoors. This is Sean climbing a cottonwood tree in a park near his house. This is a magnificent cottonwood tree, which is sacred to the indigenous peoples in that area. It must be hundreds of years old. And there's a little hole at the bottom of it in the trunk. And I used to tell the kids when they were really small, that's where the leprechauns live. And on the right, this is Henderson Park in Lethbridge, with Kira with her arm around our oldest grandson, Finn, who's turning 16 next month. And this is our son, Kevin. So Henderson Park in Lethbridge is a wonderful park. It's quite big. It's got a pond in the middle where people can go boating. There's trails to walk. There's lots of trees. It's a great place to escape the city and get into nature. And, we have this stereotypical image of Albertans being rednecks. All they want to do is drill for oil and gas. And they don't want to care about climate change and all that sort of stuff. It's not true. There are a lot of people in Alberta who are very concerned about the environment and what is happening there. And in the mall in downtown Lethbridge, you will see this display. This is just part of a display on the wall in the mall in Lethbridge. It's educating people about climate change. It's just, you probably can't see it. Maybe if you turn the lights down a bit more, could we do that? Steve, you're the light guy. Oh, okay. But there's lots of examples here on how that better? It's hard to read, I know, but it talks about the wetlands, about plants, about the importance of soil, everything that carbon can be absorbed into. Nature's way of absorbing carbon from the atmosphere and helping to lower our carbon emissions. So they're not all rednecks in Alberta, which is good to hear. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Oh, there we go. There we go. So I want to talk about the recent trip to the back of the moon by the Artemis II astronauts. When they got there, they called it Moon Joy. Every time you saw them on TV, they were all smiling. They were so happy to be there. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Jeremy Hansen, and Christina Cook. Jeremy was the Canadian astronaut. And I don't know about you, but their success and their joy just provided a much welcome distraction from all the bad news going on in the world. I know space exploration can be a bit controversial, but it has given us so much advances in our society. Our weather forecasts are much more accurate now because of space exploration and the satellites and all the information that they gather. But anyway, I just found it a very joyful distraction from all the bad news. And their photos of the moon and the earth were amazing. But they pointed out, they said, this is what they said: the photos that they shared with us paled in comparison to actually seeing it with your own eyes. It's just amazing. This is Christina Cook looking out the window of their capsule down at planet Earth. So in 2024, I went to the bookkeeper to get a copy of Marc Garneau's autobiography. Marc Garneau was the first Canadian astronaut to go into space. He did 3 missions on the space shuttle. And Marc, at the bookkeeper, this is him signing my copy of his book. Marc was there along with Chris Hadfield, his good friend Chris Hadfield. So Marc was the first Canadian astronaut to go to space 3 times, and Chris was the first Canadian to command the International Space Station. But Chris left most of the talking to Marc because this was his event. And Marc took questions from the people at the bookkeeper, and I had my hand up for a while, and he eventually pointed to me, and I asked him this question. I said, Marc, looking at the Earth from space, what emotions did you feel? And he replied that looking at our planet from space was mind-blowing. And he spent every chance he could to float over to the window and look down at Earth. He said it's something you would never get tired of. Appreciating its beauty and its incredible diversity. But then he went on to say that he was very saddened to witness pollution and ecological destruction as they orbited the Earth many times. 16 times a day they go around the Earth. He saw fires burning in the Amazon rainforest, smog covering many cities. He said he even saw a smog covering the Great Lakes, where we live. He witnessed deforestation. And the shock of realizing how narrow our atmosphere is. The atmosphere that gives us the air to breathe and keep us alive. And you recognize how thin that blanket of atmosphere is that surrounds our planet. If we were to drive from Sarnia to Toronto, what's that, about 400 miles? That's the thickness of the atmosphere. tiny compared to the size of the Earth. Chris Hadfield describes it as an onion skin surrounding the onion. Very thin layer of atmosphere. That's what's keeping us alive. And yet we keep polluting it. The Artemis II astronauts, they traveled much further, of course, than the International Space Station. So the International Space Station is just outside our atmosphere. But the Artemis II astronauts traveled almost 250,000 miles, over 400,000 kilometers to the back of the moon. And they still said the Earth was amazing to look at. So there it is, our planet. Many astronauts who go to space, some of them say the experience of looking at the Earth changes them profoundly. Like Mark Garneau, they experience a euphoria from looking at the Earth. Looking at its beauty, its luminosity, its fragility, floating there in the inky blackness of space. And as well as that euphoria, they experience a sense of unity, a unity with all people on Earth. They stop seeing borders. They stop seeing countries. They stop seeing continents. They see only one planet. And they realize everyone on Earth, we're just one family on this spaceship. Chris Hadfield said, you stop talking about them and us. There's no them and us. There is only us, is how Chris described it. And we're not just travelers on this spaceship Earth. We're also travelers with a responsibility to protect it. And what the astronauts see and experience has been referred to as the overview effect. When they're looking down from space on the Earth, what they experience, that euphoria has been called the overview effect. And a man called Frank White started to talk to astronauts to document these experiences. And his first published book, which was called The Overview Effect, was published in 1987. It was quite a small book. And since 1987, many, many more astronauts have gone into space. So many of them have been interviewed. And now this edition is over 500 pages. And this was published in 2023. And it's just amazing to see how astronauts are transformed by going into space and how they feel when they come back. William Shatner went into space. Captain Kirk from the Starship Enterprise, he actually went into space for 3 minutes on one of those vacation trips with Blue Origin. So what it does, it just takes people up to the edge of space, 400 kilometers, and they experience weightlessness just for a couple of minutes, and then they return to Earth. So William Shatner didn't have a lot of time to look at the Earth, but he did. And when he came back, he was in tears. He said, "It's so beautiful. It's incredible." But then later on, when he thought about it, he got very depressed. And he said he experienced a crushing, overwhelming sadness about the plight of the planet, what we're doing to the planet, to this beautiful planet we call home. Why are we destroying it? And so I haven't read William Shatner's book. He did write a book about it. Mark Garneau also wrote a book, which you saw me getting a copy at the bookkeeper. But he wrote that many years later. It was just published in 2024. But when he retired from astronaut life and his career in the Canadian Navy, he decided to work at the Canadian Space Agency for a while. And he gave lots of presentations across Canada. He said his favorite audience were children. He loved to go into schools and speak to children. They were just fascinated by space. They had tons of questions. That was his favorite thing. And then he decided to go into politics. And he represented one of the Montreal ridings as a Liberal MP. And he held 2 cabinet positions, Foreign Affairs and Minister of Transport. He wanted to contribute and improve our society. He actually ran for the leadership of the Liberal Party against Justin Trudeau. We all know that Justin won. But if Mark Garneau had won, we could have had an astronaut as a Prime Minister. He also co-chaired the Special Joint Committee on Medical Assistance in Dying. And he was very much in favor of medical assistance in dying because he witnessed his father suffering terribly from dementia to the point where his father could no longer communicate. And he said, looking into his father's eyes, it was as if his father was pleading with Mark to find a way to end this suffering. So as you know, the Liberal government did bring in legislation in 2016 to legalize medical assistance in dying. So sadly, less than 7 months after I had my book signed by Mark, he died in June 2025. He is 76. A few months after he was in Sarnia, he developed lymphoma and then leukemia. And by June, he was gone. From space, the Earth looks as it is, fragile, luminous, and achingly small. The wars being waged, the hatred being harbored. From deep space, none of it is visible. There is only Earth, our small world. So let me leave you with just a few thoughts to repeat the wisdom of Helen Caldecott. Only if you love something and value it will you fight to preserve and protect it. Larry called it active love. That's what it needs, active love. So one last slide. This is Don Brown. He's a retired Anglican minister in Hamilton. He belongs to a group called Elders for Climate Sanity. He's 90 years old. And here he is out in the streets of Hamilton promoting renewable energy. Sun and wind, we need it now, something on his sign. Elders for Climate Sanity in Hamilton are just one of dozens, maybe hundreds of activist organizations across Canada and the world who are advocating for climate action. And that's what we are doing here as members of Climate Action Sarnia Lambton.